Oh my goodness, we're alive right now. Wow. Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Oh, this is
everybody.
great.
Hi.
Hey, we have Stephen in from YouTube saying hello. So that's fantastic. I'm going to just put you up there, Stephen. Hi to you. Thank you for being here. We got some time to get some people in here to be watching us, but we're going to do introductions. So, as always, I'm Debbie Duncan from Psychic Fixes, and Cara, my partner in crime in writing books. Hi, Cara.
Hi.
And I want to introduce Brandi. Oh, Brandi can do anything, you guys. So,
I don't
hi,
know about
Brandi.
that.
Yes, you can. Hey,
Yes.
Kate. Kate is in, and
Hi, Steve.
everybody's here. Okay, Cara, we have so many great stories tonight. It's incredible. So I'm going to just throw this over to you to introduce our guest.
Okay, well, our guest, oh, by the way, hello, everybody. I'm so glad to see everyone. Our guest happens to be one of my oldest and dearest friends, Sandra D. We went to high school together, and we are just part of a little bestie group, the little core group of our high school girls that we're still all in contact with. Sandra, would you like to say hi to everybody?
Hi, everyone. How are you all tonight? I'm very glad to be here.
Oh, we are so excited too. And are we going to kick off with you tonight, Miss Debbie?
We're not because I'm going to sneak a couple things in here, okay?
Oh, okay.
First, your book, The Shadows of Satan, is out and we're going to promote it. You can walk into Barnes and Noble and order this or just go to Amazon. And we love for you to get it from Amazon because then you can purchase it and leave a review for us. And this is Kara's book that she wrote on her own, and it's fabulous. It's fabulous. If you like a little bit of terror, a little bit of horror, a little bit of supernatural, it's really great.
And I have to say, we decided to go on Audible with this book, and Sandra D has decided to
Woohoo!
graciously be the Audible version and read my book for me.
I am excited to narrate this book. I read it a few nights ago, and I love the story.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic
Thank
news.
you.
We're going to show one more thing, though. Okay, I have to resize this. It's so bad because Kara's name really is in it, and the rest of the title. Sorry. Okay. The Past Lives of Deborah O'Hara, Portals Through Time, is also for sale right now, and it's by me and Kara. And so, but we do have a little surprise right now for you. And so, let me go ahead and Kara, you can say a few things as I lift this up.
Our second book, The Past Lives of Deborah O'Hara, Karma at Karnak Court, which takes place in the time of Seti and Ramses in Egypt, is now out for sale. And there is our beautiful LGBTQ logo. It's our rainbow hummingbird.
It's
And
fabulous.
that's our new logo to show that we are an all-inclusive writing team. And the book is fantastic. It has twists and turns and comedy and darkness and but it's just wonderful.
So,
Awesome.
you guys can find it on Amazon and it's all linked up. So, it is a series. So, this is book two in the series. So, fabulous. So, I know that you're going to love this one. It's so interesting. And we have to tease a little bit about what might be coming up next.
Yes, we are partway through our wonderful book three in the series. And for all of you Chicagoans, you are going to love where we are traveling back in time to next. That's the only hint you're getting. But just think about the rich history of Chicago and what possibly we could be investigating or fixing. And that's your hint.
Somebody might need to mute their mic for just a minute. So, But anyway, we're so excited about our books and sharing that with you tonight. And this is the first time that we showed it, so we're really excited about that. So go to Amazon and you can buy it there. Okay, so we have a big lineup. And I have a really good one, but I heard that Brandy's going first tonight. So everybody,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
turn the lights down, get your popcorn, because we've got some really gruesome, spooky stories tonight. So Brandy, I'm gonna throw it to you, unless Cara, you have a couple words that you need to say.
No, Brandy's got this one in the bag, and it's quite spooky.
Yeah. So, I first want to point out a couple of things here. I am definitely toning down a lot of this information because it can get pretty detailed. So, if you want to know more about any of the stories I'm going to tell you tonight, please look them up. There's a lot of information on the web. It's easy to find, and I find it very interesting, but I'm not going to go into very specific details here. And I apologize in advance if you hear a dog whining in the background. It's my old man. He's 19. He sometimes just wants to whine. But my story that I'm going to start out with is about Madame Delphine Lalaurie. Okay, so she was from New Orleans, and in the spring of 1834, there was a fire that broke out, and the fire department and all the neighbors came out to see what was going on and stuff. What they was not expecting to find was a house full of some of the most horrendous things they had ever seen in their life. Now, to give you a quick background, Delphine had already been in trouble with the law on how she took care of her slaves, to the point that they had prohibited her from buying, trading, or owning slaves anymore. However, this did not stop her. She went ahead and had her family and friends buy slaves for her to have. Now, how did the fire start, you might wonder? It was started by a slave that was chained to the stove in the kitchen. Apparently, the slave had had enough and was willing to burn down the whole house around themselves just to get away from Delphine. That's how bad the situation was. That's not the worst part, though. There was another room in that house that she kept several slaves in. And the condition and what she put those slaves through, I think, is the worst I've ever heard of any slave being put through. And like I said, I am leaving out a lot of details for you all because it is horrific what she did to these people. Now, while they was trying to put out the fire, Delphine and her husband made a getaway in her carriage. They did not catch her. She did not see justice or be put to justice for what she did to these people. She got away. Now, to present day, her old home is haunted. They do ghost tours with it. And some of the things that go on in it is what you normally would see in a house with this much negative energy. You have reports of people moaning and negative feelings where you walk in and you just feel this negative energy bearing down on you. But there's a couple of other noteworthy things. So there is, I don't really want to call it a rumor because I believe this probably did happen. However, there is no proof that it happened. But people claim they see a young slave girl jumping off the roof of this house. And the story behind that is that she was whipping this girl so bad that she chose to run and jump off the roof to get away from her mistress. And the reason she was being punished? Because she pulled her hair while brushing it. So, like I said, no proof that this happened. However, people see this ghost. Another thing that falls into the history of this house is that after Lalaurie left, years later, it was turned into a school. primarily it was turned into a school for African American girls. Nothing else but that. And the girls would come up with scratches and bruises on their arms and stuff. And when the teachers would ask them what happened, the only comment they would come back with was, the woman did it. So it's speculated that it is the ghost of Madame Leray still torturing people in that house of a certain race, which is horrific and tragic. But to think that they made that a school for that reason, knowing the history of this house, kind of made my jaw drop. I would think I would found a better use for it. Another thing that they hear in this house is phantom footsteps echo through the house with regularity. Apparently, it happens all the time. So it just, I don't know.
That sounds terrifying.
It is, but just the school thing. I still can't believe the school thing.
No, that's horrible.
So, yeah, and like I said, I am PG-13ing this, guys. It was. Please look it up if you are interested, because there's a lot of information out there, and I just don't want to make this show rated R. So, I'll leave it at that.
Wow.
Yeah, that is that's a creepy story. Sandy, you got any thoughts on this one?
Wow. Yeah, a little creeped out. That is creepy. I want to read more about it.
Well, it is all over the web. She is one of the most well-known things about New Orleans. Like, her house is literally called the Murder House. So it's definitely well known.
That's
it's not one of the hidden
terrible.
facts of life out there.
That's
But I was
terrible.
thinking, just the fact that back in the day when slaves were considered mere property, she was so horrendous to them that they literally made it to where she could not own them. Should tell you something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
I won't get into the reasons why. Look it up. Because, like I said, I don't want to be rated R here.
Oh my goodness. Well, there were, so many stories of how people treated each other, and nonetheless, the slave. And I was vetting different stories, and there's one that I will save for another day, which really was an eye opener to me about how people were treated that were Black in California. So we'll have that one at some other time. But thank you, Brandi, for that. And I can imagine that the energy inside that house is to the point where, people are going to see stuff, feel stuff, and have scratches and bites and stuff like that.
Well,
It's
like I
really
said,
bad energy.
If I went into details, you would even get a clearer picture on why there's so much negative energy there. And
Wow.
I didn't mention the fact that other people feel great sorrow when they enter there, which, trust me, makes complete sense. That house has seen some horrific things.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now you even have one that is pretty bad, don't you, Debbie?
It's not bad. It's full of ghosts. I decided I'd be going with the ghosts.
Oh,
This
you're going with
is
the
a
ghost
good one.
Okay.
I purposely didn't tell you guys what I was doing. So, and who I was going to get. But this is a good one that comes from San Francisco. So, you guys may know the street that it's on as well. So it's really about this woman that lived on Lombard Street, and her name was Pat. I believe it's pronounced Montandon is her last name. Her ordeal began at her own party. Now, she was a known party girl, and she was a columnist, and she wrote a book about being a party girl, and she was on TV a lot. So anyway, she had this beautiful home, and I'm going to bring it up for you guys to see right now. And there it is.
Oh,
So she liked her parties. So it was 1968, and the socialite had invited the glitterati of San Francisco to her home, and this is 1000 Lombard Street, if you want to look it up. The theme was up my alley, astrology. Guests were paired up according to their zodiac signs and offered psychic readings from a palmist, crystal ball gazer, astrologer, and a tarot reader. At the end of the night, buoyed by compliments from her guest, she felt certain that the party had been a brilliant success. But 2 years later, she recognized it as the start of a nightmare, a total nightmare. She was 39 years old and vivacious and beautiful. Her life was positive. People envied her until it wasn't. So, what happened the night of that party, the astrology party? Uh, the tarot reader flew into a rage. And because Pat forgot to bring him a drink. So, this was what she wrote later. Quivering with rage, he directed a stream of abuse at me. He had never been treated so rudely. I was an insufferable, ungracious hostess. He was leaving, but not before he made certain he would never have any happy moments, or she wouldn't, in that house again. So he looked at her, fixed his glare, she said at her, his face puffed and distorted, and he said, I lay a curse upon you in this house. I do not forget, and I do not forgive. Remember that. So he cursed the house and he left. Within weeks, her life was falling apart. At home, she was subjected to paranormal events so relentless that they quickly transformed her from a skeptic to a believer. She was plagued by locked doors, windows flying open, freezing temperatures, persistent, despite the thermostat was only, at a normal degrees. She was routinely awakened um, at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she heard strange footsteps and music. And the music was always a specific song called Mockingbird Hill. Okay. And it would play over and over. She could hear this. So all these crazy things started. Well, more things persisted, and her home was broken into and ransacked. Her car was destroyed. When she tried to throw another party, a mysterious fire broke out. She was physically assaulted by a date one night who had to be removed by the police. She was threatened by her new neighbors, who were a gang of drug dealers. She was forced to give up her beloved Lhasa Apso, who developed sores and became fearful inside the house and was pulling his fur out. But I'll tell you, after that dog was rehomed, was fine, perfectly fine, and healed up. So she had all this crazy stuff just kept going. While in the house, she suffered bouts of dizziness, headaches, as she was disoriented. And one night, these symptoms became so severe, she almost overdosed on medication. Worst of all, within 3 years of the tarot reader's curse, three of the women closest to her, all young and healthy, all from whom she had resided in that house for a short term after the astrology party, were all dead. Two of them was a cousin, Carolyn, and a young assistant named Vera. They were terrified by the house, actually, when they lived there. They both died from suicide. The third woman was her best friend and secretary, Mary Lou. She died in the home under circumstances so mysterious, a cause of death was never determined. Now, here's what happened. We're going to May 1969. She abandoned the house to live with her new husband, Alfred, who moved the date of the wedding up so she could get out of the clutches of that curse, right? She was unable to get out of her lease, though, so it stayed empty for weeks. Well, Mary Lou asked if she might stay there. She wanted to give her newlywed daughter some space because they were living with her. And so she said, sure, you can stay there, but aren't you afraid? She certainly said, Pat said, I would never go back in that house, not on a bit. Well, a week later, flames were spotted by a neighbor. Mary Lou was found down on the bed in that bedroom, severely burned. All of the windows and doors in the room were locked. At the inquest, it was determined that the 47-year-old Mary Lou had died before the fire started, but no one could figure out how or why. It's just like this is just crazy. Now, the coroner said, Dr. Henry Turkle, I should explain to you that we have examined Mary as carefully as we know how and at great length, and we cannot establish any reason for her death. We don't know why she died. So there was an inspector for the fire department, and he worked on the case, and he couldn't figure out where it started. Okay. Now, he said, I personally went back to that apartment on my own several times to try to solve the mystery there. In my 22 years as a member of the fire department, I've had lots of experience of death by fire. There was something about this one that just wasn't right. So, tortured by the fact that the investigation into Mary Lou's death created more questions than answers, Pat went about doing her own detective work. Before her death, Ward had told her that she didn't think the tarot reader's curse was entirely to blame, that there was strange activity was already there. So maybe this was an influence that started. So I think it was probably the curse. It sounds it to me. But she did find out that prior people that lived there were had a lot of divorces and they were alcoholics and all kinds of things before she even lived there. So, in addition, at least one woman had died by suicide in the house, and neighbors who knew the deceased told her that the former resident took her life and listened to music all hours of the day, specifically a song called Mockingbird Hill. Before her suicide, cousin Carolyn confessed she continued to hear that song even after she moved away from Lombard Street. So the building was sold, but at a steep discount of a lot of money. And so it has gone on to other people. It was a 12-room, 3-story home with breathtaking views of the bay in a prime position at the end of Lombard Street, but it sold cheap. So Pat sent 2 psychics to investigate 1000 Lombard Street in 1973. When they emerged, they had strange photographs that seemed to change over time. At some point, you guys remind me of this, and I'll tell you about the photograph that I saw that changed. We put it in a book, in the Bible, got it out, and it was different. So, anyway, they said that it was haunted. And they also, the paranormal expert said they could not fully clear that house. So, anyway, that is the story of that home in San Francisco on Lombard Street, and I think it's pretty dang haunted.
I would say so. I love the blue and
Yep.
the pink, but I would say something is cursed there.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to stay there.
There's way too many people dying and all of that, but it may have started by that song that everybody heard by a previous tenant. So it was haunted. I don't want to go. I'd go. Actually, I'd go, but I don't want to live there.
I'm
No,
just
I don't
curious why that song.
Well, the previous lady, would listen to it over and over again, and that might be an imprint of energy left, left there. So somebody heard it, a neighbor or whatever, and just went right in and put itself in. And so that might be why they are sensitives. You guys are empaths. You can soak that stuff up. But that was too many bad things.
Yeah. Now I was going to tell mine next, but I think that Sandy has some very interesting and unique takes on the Amityville house. So
Oh,
I,
oh.
yes, I think I'm going to throw it to her to talk about the history and the hauntings.
Right. This is one of my favorite stories. These houses, oh, I'm with you. I'd love to go visit, but I don't think I could ever live in one. Everybody knows this story. This was a book way back. Oh wow, when we were young in
Yeah, 75.
1977.
Mm.
The book, the Jay Anson book, I believe it was
Yeah,
77.
yeah, it was. Yeah.
Well, okay, right. And everybody knows the movie. A lot of people don't know that there's a real story behind this here, though. This particular house is in a city. It gets its name. Amityville is a tiny little city in Long Island, about a half an hour away from New York City. And this little house in this area has a terrifying history. One of the things that most people don't know about the house is what happened with the original owners. The family that lived in this house in 1974 was the DeFeo family. The father in that family, his name was Ronald DeFeo Jr. He was 23 years old, and it says that he picked up a Marlin rifle and his entire family was asleep, and he went in and shot up his family to include his parents and all four of his younger siblings. So, that this terrible tragedy, this horrible thing happens in this house, and then the house is empty. So about a year later, a family comes through town and they see this gorgeous home, and the price is all the way down to $80,000. They couldn't sell the house naturally because people in the area knew what had happened there. And the Lutz family, they come into town and they, they see this and it's affordable, and nobody really tells them anything about what happened in the area, so they buy and they move in. This is the story everybody knows, right? This is the movie. They move in, all of this crazy stuff starts happening. But the difference with the Lutz family is that this was real, and it was real for them. As Hollywood as movies can be, some of the things that they said specifically that happened. Let me get to some of the stranger things that the Lutz family experienced. Was that after they moved into the house, George Lutz started dabbling into the occult. He was drawn to it. He felt like it was something that he had to do. And he had never even heard about things like that before he had moved into the house. So it was knowledge that he felt was given to him by whatever presence was in the home. They also said that George would wake up at 3:15 every single morning, which was approximately the same time that Ron DeFeo had shot his parents and his younger siblings. The Lutz family always said that they could smell things in this house. They could smell really, really strange odors. Sometimes the children said that they could see green slime, and this is before Nickelodeon, you guys. There was no such thing as green slime way back then, but the kids described what they saw as green slime literally oozing out of like keyholes and through spots in the windows and any cracks in the walls. And then finally the family gets a priest to come out. The mom goes to church and she talks to the local church, and this is my area because I'm a theological researcher. And the church laughed at her. That their first initial reaction in this story was they laughed at it. They said, well, we know, you guys know the murders that happened here. This is you need to air it out, open the windows, bring in some flowers. This was their original advice to this family, who was freaking out because weird things were happening right after they moved in. The church never ever took the complaints from the family about paranormal activity legitimately. They claimed that it must have been all in their heads, and the church suggested that the priest not even offer blessings in the home. The local priest in the area had agreed to do a lot of that and did do a lot of that because they believe he knew the family well. But the Catholic Church kind of handed the entire story off to Hollywood. Now, Cara, you know that the Lutz family wound up moving to California.
Yes.
Yeah, and part of the thing with the Lutz family is that they claimed the spirits that they experienced in the Amityville home followed them or attached to them and stayed with them.
Yes.
All right. And do you want to go ahead and tell a little bit more about the California experiences?
Yeah. Yeah. He was still waking up at 3:15 when they moved in with her mother. One of their children was having a horrific time dealing with everything. The hauntings were so prolific that it actually destroyed their marriage by the late 80s. And their son, well, his stepson, her son, but he raised him. He has actually come forward quite recently saying that what they experienced, not only in Amityville, but in California, was so horrendous and devastating that he's still traumatized to this day.
That's Daniel. Yes.
Yes, it's Daniel. Yeah, and actually, George and Kathy both died relatively young, and it's more to me. It seems like whatever attached itself to them physically caused so many problems that it just literally took their lives away, in my opinion.
It did. It really did. Part of that was the couple, they became so financially, they were truly financially devastated with a lot of the costs for especially their therapy and help that they needed over the years and just trying to deal with what they were going through. And their lawyer at the time, and this is another interesting twist in this, their lawyer who supported them 100% and helped them make the deal for the what they were going to be getting from the Hollywood movies and whatnot from that. He stood behind them 100% until they could no longer pay him. As soon as they could no longer pay him, he put out an official story that they made this up one night after drinking wine together, and it's just a Hollywood story. Now, again, the lawyer waited until he could no longer be paid to put that out. Before that, he said he had been to this house and he had seen things, and so a lot of people are unaware that this, like I said, that this is even a real family. But this real family was traumatized to the point where the son Daniel, I believe his name was Daniel, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Daniel. He says literally that house destroyed him, and he still struggles and he still needs therapies, and so. The house went on, you guys, to sell in 2017 is the last thing I could find on it. And somebody actually paid $605,000. However, it appears that nobody's living in that house right now. So I guess they bought it just to look at. Would you buy that house or live in that house? I don't think I could. I don't think I ever could.
I don't know if I ever told you this, but my dad in the mid 70s had a chance to go and be a police officer in New York as opposed to Chicago. And the Lutz family, actually, they bought it for 80, but they sold it for like 29 or something, 28. And I always thought, oh my God, what if my dad had moved out there and what if he had bought that house?
Wow. Right? We'd be having a different conversation today.
Yeah, exactly.
Just slightly.
Yeah. But I honestly, even his sister and his brother do not speak of this. But
Yes.
he did say that the ghost, that Jody, that invisible friend of his sister's, was there in California in his grandmother's house. So,
Wow.
you know, I feel for the family. I think that the lawyer
Let,
purposely did what he did to maybe he was blackmailing them for more money and they didn't have anything, and then he
let you know this, because this is a really important fact. In addition to the lawyer saying what he said, after the lawyer put that out there, George and Kathy took another lie detector test. They took several throughout this to show, and they passed. There wasn't any hint of anything other than them telling the truth. So, you know, angry lawyers who can't get paid aside, the reality is they passed the lie detector test, and that's hard enough to do when you know how to do something like that. You know, it's hard for me to believe nobody makes this kind of thing up. This whole family went through some crazy things, and I don't even know if I'd really want to walk through the house. Maybe look at it from the outside, but I don't know if I'd have it in me to stand in their California home or in the Amityville home ever.
I think I would like to go to the oldest daughter's bedroom in this house, being an empath and a sensitive, because you know there were stories that Ronald DeFeo Jr. did not act alone, that Dawn helped, and that was why she was the only one with gunshot residue on her hands. She was the only one who wasn't tucked into a bed.
Ah, interesting. See?
There was also a third friend who was there who, now the story goes that Ron, the other one, was so distraught after what Ron and Dawn had done, you know, with the parents, that that Ronald took him out of the house, you know, and they got rid of the one of the guns or whatever, and went back. When he went back, you know, the friend took off, and he saw that Dawn had killed the other kids because she didn't want witnesses, that he then in turn killed her. I
Mm.
don't know if that's necessarily true. That is something that is on record as one of the stories or the possible stories. But I don't understand how she had gun residue on her hands, and why was she not tucked into bed like the other ones?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Ron is, it says that he had to serve 25-year 2 life sentences for the murders of his family. He claimed that he had heard voices that told him to do it. But then he went on to change his story multiple times after that. So,
Right.
Yeah, right. Ron DeFeo's a murderer. Obviously, it's hard to believe anything. But the Lutz family, on the other hand, they had everything to lose and nothing to gain by coming out with their story and talking about what they were dealing with in their homes. And that's terrifying. It really is. It's just terrifying.
It is. And now I will say, our next story also deals with an entire murder of a family. However, it was the crime was never solved. And that's, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of this story, but it's the uh, Villisca axe murders of 1912. Um, it was the Moore family in Villisca, Iowa. They actually were killed with two other children who were visiting overnight between June 9th and June 10th of 1912 in Iowa. And the Moore family consisted of Josiah, who was the father, and his wife Sarah, and they had four children. They had Herman, who was 11, Mary Catherine, who was 10, Arthur, who was 7, and Paul, who was 5. Now, Mary Catherine had two very close friends in Lena Gertrude and Ina May Stillinger. Lena was 12 and Ina was 8. And she invited them to spend the night, and you know everything was great. The evening of the 9th, they all walked down to their church, a Presbyterian church, for a Children's Day program that Sarah had organized and coordinated, and it was a lot of fun. And witnesses said that the family and the two little visitors left the church about 9:30 to walk home, So the guesstimate is that they arrived between 9:45 and 10 o'clock that night. No one's heard from them after that. The next morning, their neighbor, which, I mean, people might call her a nosy neighbor, or they might say that she was just concerned. She noticed that the family was not out doing their daily chores. And so she knocked on the door and tried to open it and discovered that the door was locked, which was unusual for the family. So she went and let out their chickens and then called Josiah's brother Ross to come over and said something's wrong. So he shows up and he knocked on the door, pounded really, and got no answer. So he took the key that he had and he unlocked the door and he walked through the house while she stayed on the porch. And he went through the parlor to where the guest room was. And he opened the door and he found the two visiting children dead. They had been bludgeoned to death. One of them was possibly a victim of sexual assault. She had defensive wounds on her. She was the only person who had defensive wounds. So I'm going to really PG this because, I mean, you can look it up and read how horrendous it was. But he immediately ran out when he saw them. And he told Mary, go call the peace officer who was Henry Horton. And when he got there, he went up through the rest of the house to the second floor. And he found the parents murdered and the four children of the parents murdered. Everyone was bludgeoned except for the father. The sharp end of the axe was actually used to hack him to death. Everybody else was bludgeoned. A lot of speculation was that it was someone targeting him because of how badly devastated his body was. And the coroner said that the murders happened between 12 a.m. and 5 a.m. Now, the interesting part is, I mean, you can see how that the house has a second floor, but there's also an attic. And what they found when they searched the attic, now the family, I'm going to tell you right now, did not smoke. They found cigarette butts, fresh cigarette butts up in the attic. They believe that the killer or the killers waited in that attic smoking until the family was in bed asleep before they came down to attack. And they believe that the father was the first one attacked, followed by the mother. And then the four children that were up on the second floor, their children were killed next. They believe they then went back in to the master bedroom and hit the father a few more times before going downstairs and discovering the two little girls in the guest room. And it was just, I mean, the severity was just horrible. They had several suspects, but they couldn't nail down anybody. Now, one of the main suspects actually was tried twice, and that was a traveling reverend by the name of Kelly. And the first time he was tried, it was a hung jury, and the second time he was acquitted. Now, the strange thing about him was that he was arrested in another state for sexually harassing a woman who had applied to be his secretary, his church secretary. But things he was in town at that point. So there were just things that added up. And one of the other things that is very strange about this is before this murder, there were two axe murders, one taking place in Colorado and one taking place a little closer to Iowa, on the same train, the same railroad track train, where the train would go back and forth. And then there were two that were done after. All of the same things happened in these different murders. The windows were covered by loose items. Some were clothing, some were aprons. different things. The windows were all shielded. So they believe that the murders actually could have been the work of one person or a group of people. Now the house has been, it's so haunted. It has been, I'm talking. The house has been on several different paranormal shows, including Ghost Adventures, Scariest Places on Earth, Most Terrifying Places in America, and there's several more, too many to list. And the in 1994, a woman and her husband, the Mr. and Mrs. Lynn, her name is Martha. Okay, I'll fix it in a minute. They bought the house to make it a museum of Americana, just the turn of the century living. They were going to restore it. Just, had no idea about the murders, and they started getting people to coming up and asking them if they could do a paranormal investigation. That's how they found out that these murders had occurred in the house. And the hauntings have been debated on whether or not it's a residual energy or if it's the actual victims in there. And some of the things that they hear are they hear disembodied giggles, traumatic screams, unexplained movements from room to room. And the worst part is there is a strange fog that moves from room to room at the time of the murders when the train passes through. It's very, very scary. There have actually been visitors who have felt like they were being possessed, acting strangely in certain parts of the house. And even the owner has had some paranormal experiences, but she doesn't want to influence people who do come to investigate, because they have turned it into a paranormal hotel and kind of a shrine to the family so that they never forget what happened to them. So if you have a group of 6 or less, you can spend the night at, they suggest you bring your own sleeping bags, but you can spend the night there for $428, and you can do paranormal investigations all night long. And then they also have groups that can go through for $10 during the day. But she doesn't want to talk about what happened to her in the house because she wants people to see if they can communicate with whatever is there. So there's something, but no one was ever convicted of the crimes. Very, very sad, sad story.
Frightening.
Yeah.
Do you think you'd stay there?
Axe murders.
What'd you say, Brandi?
What is up with all the axe murders back in that time?
I think it was an easy weapon to get, maybe.
Maybe that's it. It just seems like there was a bunch back then.
Yeah.
Well, people tend to grab what's near them. So.
Yeah. Oh, and it was the family's own axe that was used on them. So
crazy.
I mean, Brandi even has another horrific family murder tonight, and the hauntings that are associated with that creeps me out too. That's the Wolf family murders.
Yes. Yes.
That little one in white, that's the only survivor.
Yep, wow. That little baby is the only survivor out of the family of 8. So, the Wolf family was a German family that had immigrated separately. The mother and father had immigrated separately to the United States, found each other, fell in love, had a family. That kind of, happy story. And he was actually a very well-to-do farmer. I mean, he had one of the top sellers in his farm community. He had money. And he had the more up-to-date tractors and stuff that a lot of family would, other farmers envied. Let's put it that way. Now, On April 22nd, 1920, one of his neighbors went by and noticed that they still had laundry left just flapping around on the clothes line. And he had noticed it had been there for a couple of days and thought it was really strange because Beta, and I'm probably saying her name wrong because it's German, the wife, the mom, would never have left her laundry out for that long on the clothesline. So the neighbor stopped in to see, if everybody was okay. Did they fall sick? Did they need any help? And what he walked into would haunt him for the rest of his life. So, and as with my first story, I'm leaving a lot of the gruesome details out for you all. If you want to know more, please look it up on the web. You can find it very easily. But what he discovered was the first thing he found was when he went into the barn to check on the livestock, he noticed that he found 3 bodies in there. And one was Jacob Wolf, which is the father, and 2 of Wolf's young daughters, Maria and Edna, were in the barn with him, and they were dead. Now, when he went further to investigate, he found in the basement, led there by a nice blood trail, that's how he found them in the basement, was basically the rest of the family and a hired hand. So there was the wife, which was Beta, however you say her name, and the rest of their daughters. They had all girls, which was Bertha, Lydia, and Martha, and the hired boy, Jacob Hoffer. Now, the kids' ages, so for the girls, they ranged from 12 to 3, and the hired boy was only 13. So they were young little children. They had all been killed with a shotgun, but one who was killed with a hatchet. Now, they had another daughter who was 8 months old, named Emma. Emma was found in her crib, crying. She was hungry. She hadn't been fed or changed in at least 2 days. If she had been left there any longer, odds are she would have died. But the neighbor scooped her up, took her home to his wife while he called the sheriff. Because he didn't know if whoever had done this was still there, and he wanted to make sure the baby was safe. So she, changed it, fed it, and the baby, Emma, was safe. Now, sadly, this is not the only family that was torn apart in this case. So, at this time, it was a political race going on, and the 2 politicians decided to use this murder as a way to gain favor with their population. And the way they did that was one of them, the one that was currently in office, decided to sit back and let the local law enforcement do their jobs. The other one that was running for the office decided that he was going to hire his own little posse and bring in the murderer. And that's exactly what he did. He hired his own little posse from people outside of the community, outside of the county, to come in and hunt down the killer. And the person they decided to identify as the killer was one of the Wolf's neighbors, Henry Layer. Now, the reason they localized or focused in on him was because a year prior, Wolf's dog had bit Layer's cow, and it caused a feud. Now, the feud resulted in yelling back and forth across the fence line, basically. That was it. Later that year, the cow was healed up well enough that it went to auction and sold for its regular price. That was the feud that supposedly caused this man to go slaughter our whole family. He confessed, and he was sent to prison. Now, with that confession, let's add in that he later would claim that he had been beaten into confessing. And according to the jailhouse doctor, he came in covered in cuts, abrasions, and contusions. So he definitely looked like he'd been beaten. And the confession did not match any of the details of the crime. He couldn't even tell you where the bodies were, what was used to kill them. He knew nothing. And there were several eyewitnesses claiming that at the time of the murder happening, they all saw Henry Layer in his own fields working his fields. He never left. But he went to prison for it. Now, with him going to prison, his wife could no longer afford to raise their family. She couldn't afford to keep the kids. So all of his children went to an orphanage. And sadly, his 6-year-old son, and I'm going to attempt this name, Berthold Layer, was killed in a farm accident when he was 6 years old and was run over by a beet truck after being sent to this orphanage. So this crime tore apart two families. As far as baby Emma goes, she was adopted, but it wasn't into a happy home. She didn't have that happy, oh, they loved me, they wanted me. It was more, she was adopted and then she was given one dress to wear and criticized and literally picked on and bullied by the town for the rest of her life because she was known as the Wolf Girl. Look, it's
Wasn't
the Wolf Girl.
wasn't it her aunt, the farm boy's mother? She adopted her and kind of was very cold to her because she had lost her own son in this tragedy.
That's the speculation that was why she treated her that way. Of course, we don't know why. It's just that everybody is thinking that it was her not being able to cope with the fact that she had lost her own son, and on top of it, had a new baby thrusted into her arms. So it's speculated that she was unable to form that bond with this child.
Yeah.
So, shortly after the funeral, all of his farming equipment and stuff like that got auctioned off very quickly. And of course, the politician that hired the posse got elected that year. But since we're running out of time, I'll make this short and sweet. The hauntings, I had to go into a rabbit hole to find because it's more local legend and not really talked about online very much. So thank you, Reddit, for all this information I have. What is known is that you have children, or people hear children laughing and playing. You hear dogs barking. You hear livestock where there's no livestock. It's almost as if the farm is still going, just on another spectral plane.
Wow.
And you're just hearing it. So it's like their life didn't stop that day. It just moved to a different plane, and they're still living it. But yeah, like I said, it's a very interesting case. You should really look into it. Look, follow why the politicians did what they did. It, how this innocent man. Oh, and another thing was that Layer died 5 years later in prison, and his final words were said to be, "My eyes have seen, but my hands are clean." And another sad little fact about this whole case is that on the gravestone for this family, it is written, "The murdered family." That is what is on their gravestone. And I think that's just a sad, tragic way to remember a whole family.
Yeah.
I almost, used that photo of the gravestone, but we had so many photos tonight, I didn't. But that's sad.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think all the stories tonight have been so tragic.
It's like whole families being wiped
Right.
out. It's just hard to believe that in most cases, all these families were wiped out by one person. That one person could devastate a whole family like that without any thought about it. It's just, okay, you're gone. I'm good. I'm going now.
Wow, that was, it is sad, and there's just multiple, through history, these tragic stories. They're true. And there we go with the starting of something of fear, and all those murders and everything creates a dark energy and attracts, some of the dark things out there. And so then we have hauntings. So, but, I think that you guys, our viewers, are watching 4 people that have experienced hauntings. And we see things fly in my house, things happen. And so this stuff is real, and we're happy to, be able to bring this to you, though tonight was a very tragic night of stories. We want to tell you, this is there are ghosts, there are these things that and so kind of, to open up everybody's perspective on what's really out there. So, Cara, any last words here?
I want to
I
thank.
have a couple.
Oh, go ahead.
I want to say after we discussed all these horrible things that's happened to families that, it is going to be the 4th of July. Take your families, have a family day, hug them tight because as these stories have shown, it can all be gone so quickly.
Oh,
So enjoy
So
your
true.
4th and enjoy your family.
Very
yeah,
true. Very true.
absolutely. I want to thank Sandra D for
Aw,
coming.
thanks.
You were amazing, and I love your knowledge of hauntings and sad, backstories. You're an amazing storyteller.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Yes.
I'm
Thank
very happy to
you.
get to hang out with you guys tonight.
You
Oh,
you are welcome.
anytime.
It was
Yeah,
a pleasure to have you.
Thanks.
but I mean,
Oh,
that's all I have. I think
okay.
that we're running a little late, and I know all of us have our families to get to.
Right?
Yeah. Yes. Well, everybody, thank you for watching. You're everything, the viewers to us. As we're love to be here. We'll be back next Saturday. Cara, do we have anything scheduled yet for next Saturday?
I think we're going to. I think we're going to do surprise and do a little tease later this week, and
Okay.
we'll figure out. But we definitely know that there will be hauntings and ghostly tales involved.
Okay, you guys. Again, our second book in the series of the past lives of Deborah O'Hara, on sale now on Amazon. So go there and pick yourself up book 2 and book 1 if you haven't read it yet. We
Yes.
have really good feedback on it. So we're going to go and we're going to say goodnight. Again, Sandra, thank you so much. Brandi, love you. Cara, love you. And we'll see you guys next week. All
Yes.
right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy
Bye.
happy 4th.